Before us lie the boundless lands of the 19th century American frontier, where nature dictates its harsh laws. Winter here is not just a change of season, but a real test of endurance. A test of human will and ingenuity. Settler families, hundreds of miles from civilization, faced icy winds and days-long blizzards, with only the simplest tools and knowledge accumulated over generations at their disposal. Their struggle for warmth was daily and allowed for no mistakes. Every decision, from choosing a location for a house to how to stack firewood, was critical. In these conditions, survival became a precise science where there was no room for chance. The methods they used may seem primitive today, but behind them lay a deep logic and understanding of the laws of physics. Watch the video to the end to learn how ordinary clay combined with moss created a wall impervious to the cold, and how a simple household item could mean the difference between warmth and freezing. Choosing a location for a winter dwelling was the first and perhaps most important step in the survival strategy. Settlers were guided not by aesthetic considerations, but by strict calculations based on observations of the sun's movement and wind direction. Houses were never built on open plains or hilltops, where they would be vulnerable to icy gusts. The ideal location was considered to be on a south-facing slope, protected from the north by dense forest or natural terrain. This location allowed maximum use of the short winter days for passive heating of the walls by the sun's rays. The angle of the roof was also important. It had to be steep enough so that snow would not accumulate and create excessive load. At the same time, a thin layer of snow on the roof was welcome, as it served as an additional layer of natural insulation. It was a delicate balance that had to be maintained. The very design of the house was aimed at maximizing heat retention within a small space. Settlers often built dwellings partially sunk into the ground, using the constant temperature of the soil to protect against frost. The walls were built from the thickest logs that could be found and processed, carefully fitting them together. The main task was to create an airtight capsule capable of withstanding the outside cold. Windows, if any, were very small and only on the south side to let in light, but not let out precious heat. At night, they were closed with thick wooden shutters, which were additionally insulated from the inside. Doorways were always made high, and the doors themselves were massive and double, creating a small vestibule that blocked the flow of cold air. Every detail of the architecture was designed with one goal in mind: to retain heat. We would be very interested to hear your opinion. What do you think about applying similar passive heating principles in modern architecture? Please share your thoughts in the comments. The central element of any frontier dwelling was the hearth, which was not just a stove, but a complex engineering system. It was built of wild stone and clay, choosing materials that could accumulate and release heat for as long as possible. The location of the hearth in the center of the house was not accidental. This allowed the heat to be distributed evenly throughout the living space. The massive stone walls of the stove heated up in a few hours and continued to radiate heat throughout the night. The chimney was designed so that hot air would not escape immediately. The smoke channels were made winding and long, forcing the smoke to give off maximum heat to the masonry before leaving the room. This significantly increased the efficiency of the entire heating system. A properly built hearth could maintain a comfortable temperature in the house, even with only one fire per day. The hearth not only served as a heater, but also as the center of the family's domestic life. Food was prepared on it, using different levels and niches for cooking, stewing, and baking. The hot surface of the stove was used to dry clothes, shoes, and herbs harvested for the winter. Thus, the energy from fuel combustion was used with maximum efficiency to solve several tasks at once. Sleeping places, known as leżankas, were often arranged near the hearth. This was the warmest place in the house, where warm air rose from the stove. Sleeping in close proximity to the heat source allowed the body to recover its strength with minimal energy expenditure. The hearth was not just an interior decoration, but the true heart of the home, on whose smooth operation depended the well-being of all its inhabitants. But even the most perfect hearth is useless without the right fuel, and its preparation was a separate, complex science. Read on to the next chapter to find out why the choice of wood was as important as the design of the stove itself. Preparing firewood was not just mechanical work, but a process that required a deep understanding of the properties of different types of wood. Settlers never used the first tree they came across, as the efficiency of heating and the safety of their homes depended on the right choice of fuel. Each type of wood had its own unique burning characteristics that had to be taken into account. For example, hardwoods such as oak or maple burned slowly and evenly, giving off a lot of heat and leaving long smoldering embers. Such firewood was ideal for maintaining heat during long winter nights. It was placed in the hearth in the evening and continued to give off heat until morning, eliminating the need to wake up and add fuel. However, it was difficult to light such logs, so other types of wood were used for kindling. Birch, for example, ignited easily due to the tar content in its bark and produced a bright, hot flame that quickly warmed up a house that had cooled down overnight. Coniferous woods, such as pine or spruce, burned very hot and fast, but had a serious drawback. Due to their high resin content, they sparked a lot and produced a large amount of soot, which settled in the chimney. This required more frequent cleaning of the flues to prevent fires. Therefore, coniferous wood was mainly used for quick tasks, such as cooking, but not for long-term heating. The process of drying wood was also of great importance. Firewood was never used immediately after felling, as wet wood burns poorly, produces a lot of smoke and little heat. Fuel was prepared a year before use by stacking logs in well-ventilated wood piles. During this time, moisture evaporated and the wood acquired optimal burning properties. This foresight was the key to efficient and economical heating throughout the winter. Even the best fireplace and the highest quality firewood could not heat a house if its walls let in cold air. Fighting drafts was one of the main tasks in preparing a home for winter. The walls of log houses were never perfectly smooth, and there were numerous gaps between the logs through which the icy wind penetrated. The process of sealing them, called caulking, was a painstaking and vital task. The most accessible natural materials were used as insulation. Most often, this was dry moss, which was collected in large quantities in the forest. Moss has excellent thermal insulation properties, is elastic, and fills voids well. It was tightly packed into the gaps between the logs using special wooden spatulas, creating a barrier to cold air. In addition to moss, a mixture of clay and chopped straw or grass was widely used. After drying, this mixture formed a strong and airtight crust that not only protected against the wind, but also prevented moisture from penetrating. Clay plaster was used to cover not only the gaps between the logs, but also the entire surface of the walls, especially on the north side, which was the coldest. This created an additional layer of insulation that worked on the principle of a thermos. Particular attention was paid to sealing window and door openings. Fabric rolls stuffed with wool or tow were laid around the perimeter of the frames and boxes. At night, the door was often additionally covered from the inside with a heavy blanket or tan skin, which created another barrier to cold air. These seemingly insignificant details, when taken together, had a noticeable effect, allowing precious heat to be retained inside the house. But how did the settlers keep their own bodies warm when they went outside? You will find out in the next chapter. In the bitter cold of the frontier, clothing became a vital tool for survival, transforming from a simple item of wardrobe into a personal, wearable fortress. Its effectiveness was determined not by thickness, but by a well-designed system based on principles that still form the basis of equipment for extreme conditions today. The main principle was layering, a thoughtful combination of several layers of clothing, each of which performed its own unique function. The air pockets formed between these layers became the main barrier to the cold, retaining body heat and creating an individual microclimate. The first layer, in direct contact with the skin, had a critically important task: moisture management. The settlers intuitively understood that wet fabric on the body rapidly dissipates heat. Wool was most often used for this layer, a unique natural material capable of absorbing a significant amount of moisture while retaining its thermal insulation properties. Unlike cotton, which becomes a cold compress when wet, wool continued to warm the body, which was vital during physical exertion. On top of the underwear, a middle main insulating layer was worn. As a rule, this was a loose-fitting shirt and trousers made of thick, coarse woolen fabric or homespun cloth. The loose fit of this layer was no accident. It allowed for maximum airspace between the first and third layers. It was this air, captured and warmed by the body, that was the main insulator. Sometimes several thinner shirts could be used as the middle layer, allowing for flexible adjustment of the level of warmth depending on the weather and the intensity of the work. The purpose of the top layer was to protect against two main enemies: wind and moisture. Wind can instantly blow warm air out from under clothing, negating the effectiveness of the insulating layers. To protect against it, jackets and long raincoats made of durable, dense materials were used. The most common materials were tarred or oiled canvas, which became virtually windproof and water repellent. In dry frost conditions, preference was given to clothing made of thick but softly tanned leather or suede. It provided excellent protection from the wind and was very durable, which was important when working in the forest. In the most severe frosts, especially when spending long periods of time outdoors without active movement, sheepskin coats were worn. Their main design feature was that they were worn with the fur on the inside. In this way, the thick wool created a voluminous heat-insulating layer directly against the body, while the smooth leather side served as a barrier against the wind. Realizing that the greatest heat loss occurs through the head, hands, and feet, the settlers paid primary attention to protecting them. They wore deep fur or felt hats, often with ear flaps that could be lowered and tied under the chin, protecting not only the ears but also the cheeks and neck from the cold. A voluminous woolen scarf served not only to warm the neck, but also to seal the collar of the outer garment, blocking the path of cold air. Hands were protected with roomy mittens rather than gloves. This design allowed the fingers to stay together and warm each other, creating a shared warm space. A system of double mittens was often used. Thin knitted mittens were worn inside, and large leather or fur mittens were worn over them. This allowed the upper mitten to be removed when necessary for delicate work, without leaving the hand completely unprotected. Protecting the feet was perhaps the most difficult system. Several pairs of long woolen stockings were worn on the feet. Shoes were deliberately made several sizes larger, which allowed for the use of multi-layered insoles made of felt, dry grass, or even newspaper. Spacious footwear was critically important. It did not interfere with blood circulation, allowing warm blood to flow freely to the toes, and accommodated all the insulating layers. The boots themselves were made of thick, grease-impregnated leather to protect the feet from moisture. Every detail of this wearable shelter was thought out and refined by the harsh experience of generations for whom the right clothing was synonymous with life. Keeping warm at night, when temperatures dropped to critical levels and human activity was minimal, required a special approach. Sleeping places were never located directly on the floor, as cold air always accumulates at the bottom. Beds were simple, wooden platforms raised 30 to 40 centimeters above the floor. This allowed people to avoid contact with the coldest area in the room. Sacks made of coarse fabric, tightly stuffed with dry straw, hay, or fallen leaves, were used as mattresses. Such filling not only provided softness, but also served as an excellent heat insulator, protecting against the cold coming from below from the frozen ground. The contents of the mattresses were regularly changed and dried by the hearth to prevent dampness and caking. Heavy, thick blankets, often made by hand, were used for covering. The most valuable were quilted blankets sewn from many layers of fabric or scraps. Air pockets formed between the layers, which significantly increased their heat-saving properties. Tanned skins were often thrown over the blankets to serve as an additional barrier against the cold. In some houses, sleeping places were arranged on lofts, wide wooden platforms under the ceiling. This arrangement was most advantageous from a thermodynamic point of view, as the warmest air from the hearth always rises. Sleeping under the ceiling guaranteed that you would be in the warmest area of the house throughout the night. But to maintain strength, it was necessary not only to stay warm, but also to eat properly. We will discuss how food helped to keep warm in the next chapter. During the winter, the diet of border families changed, and foods that could give the body maximum energy to generate internal heat came to the fore. The basis of the diet was not light salads, but high-calorie and fatty dishes. Fats and carbohydrates were the fuel that allowed the body to withstand the external cold, so their consumption increased significantly. Animal fats were the most important element of the diet. They were consumed in their pure form, added to porridge and soups, and used for frying. Fat not only provided the body with the necessary energy, but also contributed to the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins, which was important given the meager winter menu. Properly prepared and stored fat was a strategic reserve that was used very sparingly. Another source of energy was slow carbohydrates, which were obtained from whole grains, legumes, and root vegetables. Thick, rich porridges and soups made from lentils, peas, or barley provided a long-lasting feeling of fullness and ensured a steady supply of energy to the body. Potatoes, turnips, and carrots, stored underground since autumn, became the basis for many winter dishes. Hot food and drinks played an important role not only in nutrition, but also in the process of warming up. The day often began and ended with hot soup or herbal tea. Consuming warm liquids helped to quickly raise body temperature and improve blood circulation. This simple method was an effective way to warm up quickly after working in the cold. The daily life of a family in winter was strictly governed by the principles of heat and energy conservation. All activities were planned in such a way as to minimize heat loss and make the most efficient use of available resources. This applied to both the daily routine and household chores. All activity was concentrated in one, the warmest room, usually around the hearth. People tried to minimize the number of times they went outside. All necessary tasks that could be done at once were grouped together. For example, going out to fetch firewood was combined with checking on the livestock and drawing water so as not to open the front door unnecessarily. Every time cold air escaped outside and cold air entered inside was considered an undesirable loss of a precious resource. Many tasks that were performed outside in the summer were moved inside the house in the winter. Repairing tools, weaving ropes, tanning hides, spinning, all this was done in the warmth of the hearth. This not only saved heat, but also helped to strengthen family ties as all family members spent long winter evenings together working together. The daily routine was also adjusted to natural lighting. People got up at dawn and went to bed shortly after sunset to make the most of daylight hours and save fuel for lamps. Active work was done during the warmest part of the day, while the evening was devoted to more peaceful activities. This way of life was not a whim, but a necessity dictated by harsh conditions. With the onset of winter, daylight hours were drastically reduced, and long evenings plunged the settlers' homes into darkness. Artificial lighting was not a luxury, but a necessity that allowed them to continue working and maintain a normal life. However, light sources were primitive and had to be used sparingly, as fuel for them was a valuable resource. The most common source of light was tallow candles, which families often made themselves. Animal fat was melted down and poured into molds with a wick made of cotton or linen thread. These candles gave off a dim, smoky light and had a specific smell, but they were the most affordable option for lighting. They were lit only during dinner or for doing small tasks that required precision. Another option was oil lamps, which were simple dishes with wicks filled with fat or oil. They gave off slightly brighter light than candles and burned longer. Various types of fat could be used as fuel. Lighting efficiency was increased with the help of simple reflectors made of polished metal or foil, which were placed behind the lamp to direct the light in the desired direction. To save money, the whole family gathered around a single light source. In the evening, by the hearth or at a table lit by a single candle, adults did needlework or repairs, while the elders told stories. This created a special atmosphere of comfort and unity. Bright light was a rarity, and people got used to performing many activities in dim light, relying on touch and memory. The long months spent in the confined space of a small house, in constant cold and darkness, were a serious test not only for the body, but also for the spirit. Maintaining a positive attitude and a healthy psychological atmosphere in the family was no less important than keeping warm. The settlers intuitively understood the importance of rituals, joint activities, and plans for the future in combating despondency. One of the main ways to pass the long winter evenings was storytelling. The older generations passed on family traditions, legends, and fairy tales to the younger ones. This was not only entertaining, but also strengthened the sense of continuity and family identity. Singing together and playing simple musical instruments also helped to lift spirits and bring the family closer together. Working together was another important element of psychological stability. Working together to repair utensils, make clothes, or planned spring fieldwork created a sense of common purpose and interdependence. Each family member doing their part felt needed and important for the survival of the whole community. This helped to avoid feelings of isolation and helplessness. Planning for the future played a huge role. Conversations about what would be planted in the spring, what buildings would need to be erected, and what trips would be taken gave hope and helped people get through the darkest and coldest days. Thoughts of the future warmth and rebirth of nature served as a powerful stimulus that allowed us to keep our spirits up and continue our daily struggle with the harsh conditions of winter. We have looked at just a few of the methods that allowed frontier families to withstand the harshest winters. Their survival was not a matter of luck, but the result of a system of deep knowledge, strict discipline, and incredible ingenuity. Every aspect of their lives, from the architecture of their homes to their evening rituals, was part of a unified strategy aimed at preserving their most valuable resource: heat. This experience shows how closely human life was connected to nature and how deeply people understood its laws. Many of these principles, based on simple physics and common sense, are still relevant today. They remind us that resilience and adaptability are key qualities for survival in any conditions, even the most difficult ones. Which of the survival methods described above did you find most ingenious or unexpected? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new research on how humans found solutions in the most extreme situations in history.